I'm Sarah Johnson, 25, female. I live in a small but cozy apartment in the city, a place I earned through sheer hard work and countless late nights. For the past 3 years, I've poured my heart and soul into my role as a marketing manager at Innovate Inc., a tech firm that promised the world. I thought I was building a future, but it turned out I was just a placeholder in someone else's greedy game. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My journey at Innovate Inc. felt like a textbook success story. Hired right out of college as a junior coordinator, I was hungry and dedicated. I didn't just meet expectations, I vaulted over them. I saw gaps in our strategy that seasoned veterans missed, and I wasn't afraid to voice my ideas. My boss, David Miller, the director of sales and marketing, seemed to appreciate my drive. He was a classic corporate shark, impeccably dressed, charming when he needed to be, and utterly ruthless. In my early days, I saw his ruthlessness as a strength, a sign of a true leader. I mistook his professional interest for genuine mentorship. "Sarah, you have a killer instinct for this," he'd said after my first big campaign pitch, which had been a massive success. "You see the board differently than everyone else." His praise was like a drug, fueling my ambition. Within 2 years, I was promoted to marketing manager, leading my own team and handling our company's flagship product, the Nexus, a software suite. It was a high-pressure, high-stakes role, and I thrived in it. I was living my dream, or so I thought. I was known as the department's rising star, the one who could turn lukewarm leads into blazing sales. My team respected me because I worked just as hard, if not harder, than any of them. I was fair, I listened, and I always gave credit where it was due. 6 months ago, a new intern joined our team. Jessica Chen was 23, fresh-faced, and radiated an almost painfully eager energy. She reminded me of myself when I first started, and I decided to take her under my wing. I saw potential in her. She was a quick learner, always asking questions, always offering to stay late. "I just want to absorb everything," she'd say, her eyes wide with admiration. I gave her real responsibilities, not just fetching coffee or making copies. I included her in high-level strategy meetings, showed her the intricate analytics behind our campaigns, and even let her manage our social media push for the upcoming Nexus 4.0 launch. David was impressed. "You're a good mentor, Sarah," he commented one afternoon, seeing me walk Jessica through a new analytics dashboard. "She's lucky to have you." My biggest project, the one I had been building for over a year, was the global launch strategy for Nexus 4.0. This wasn't just another update, it was a complete overhaul of our most profitable product. The success of this launch would determine the company's trajectory for the next 5 years. I lived and breathed this project. My plan, codenamed Project Chimera, was a multifaceted digital campaign that integrated AI-driven customer targeting with a revolutionary interactive web experience. It was complex, ambitious, and, I was confident, completely groundbreaking. I had presented the initial framework to David and the executive board, and they had been blown away. They greenlit a substantial budget and gave me full autonomy. Jessica was my right hand on Project Chimera. She helped me organize the data, storyboard the campaign flow, and liaise with the web development team. I trusted her implicitly. I shared my password, protected work folder with her, gave her access to my campaign calendar, and even confided in her about my anxieties and hopes for the launch. "We're going to knock this out of the park, Jessica," I told her one evening as we were the last two to leave the office. She smiled, a bright, reassuring smile. "I know we will, Sarah, thanks to you." Looking back, I can see the flicker of something else in her eyes, something that wasn't admiration. But at the time, I was too focused, too trusting to recognize the warning signs. I was the rising star, and I was about to be burned out of the sky. The shift was subtle at first, almost unnoticeable. It started about 2 months before the scheduled launch of Nexus 4.0. David, who had always maintained an open-door policy with me, suddenly had a perpetually full calendar. My weekly one meetings were either cancelled at the last minute or rescheduled, only to be cancelled again. When I did manage to catch him in the hallway, his responses were clipped and evasive. "Everything's on track, right, Sarah? Just keep me posted via email." He'd clap me on the shoulder and hurry away before I could get into any real detail. I chalked it up to the immense pressure he was under from the board. The Nexus launch was his responsibility as much as mine. Then came the closed door meetings. I'd see David and Jessica heading into a conference room, sometimes with members of the finance or development teams, but never with me, the project lead. The first time it happened, I felt a pang of confusion. I asked Jessica about it later. Oh, that David just wanted me to show the budget projections to finance, she said breezily, not quite meeting my eye. He didn't want to bother you with the small stuff. It was a plausible lie. I was busy, and maybe he was trying to delegate, but it kept happening. They were meeting 2, sometimes 3 times a week. The whispers started among my own team members. Is Jessica a manager now? One of them asked half. Jokingly, I'd just laugh it off, but a seed of doubt had been planted. My access to certain project files started getting spotty. One afternoon, I tried to open the final budget allocation spreadsheet on the shared server and was met with an access denied message. I figured it was a common network glitch. I walked over to the IT department to see my friend Mike Williams. Mike was the senior data analyst, a quiet genius who knew the company's digital infrastructure better than anyone. Hey Mike, I'm getting locked out of the Chimera budget file. Can you take a look? I asked. He typed for a few moments, his brow furrowed. That's weird, he said. The access permissions were changed this morning. Only David and Jessica have full control now. You've been moved to view only. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. View only? Why would he do that? Mike just shrugged, giving me a sympathetic look. I don't know, Sarah, but it came from David's terminal. I confronted Jessica about it, trying to keep my tone neutral. Hey, did David say anything about changing the file permissions? I can't make edits to the budget anymore. She flushed, looking flustered for the first time since I'd met her. Oh, he must have done that by mistake. You know how he is with technology, she stammered. He was probably trying to protect the file from accidental changes before the final review. I'll mention it to him. She never did. The access was never restored. From that point on, I was effectively sidelined from the financial and logistical oversight of my own project. The final, undeniable sign came during a departmental town hall meeting. David was presenting the quarterly marketing overview. When he got to the Nexus 4.0 launch, he put up a slide outlining the core strategy. It was my work, my ideas, my project Chimera, but my name was nowhere on the slide. Instead, at the bottom it read, Strategy Lead, David Miller, with key support from Jessica Chen. I felt the blood drain from my face. I sat there, frozen in my chair, as he spoke about his vision for the launch. He used my phrases, my key selling points, my data projections. Jessica sat in the front row, nodding along, looking every bit the part of the project's architect. After the presentation, several colleagues came up to me, their expressions a mixture of confusion and pity. I thought Chimera was your baby. One of them whispered. I didn't know what to say. I just smiled weakly and said, it's a team effort. But I knew deep down that this was no longer a team. It was a coup. The end came faster than I could have imagined. It was a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 month before the Nexus 4.0 launch. I walked into the office feeling a sense of dread that had become my constant companion. The atmosphere was thick with an unspoken tension. People avoided my gaze. My own team members gave me weak, nervous smiles. I sat down at my desk and tried to focus on work, but my mind was racing. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't fathom how bad it was about to get. At 10 a.m., an email popped into my inbox. The subject line was stark, meeting invitation. It was from David's assistant. The location was HR. My heart sank into my shoes. There is only one reason a manager summons you to a meeting in HR without any prior context. I took a deep breath, gathered myself, and made the long, lonely walk down the hallway. Every step felt like a mile. I passed Jessica's desk on the way. She was typing furiously, refusing to look up, refusing to acknowledge my existence. That was all the confirmation I needed. The HR office was a sterile, soulless room with gray walls and a generic motivational poster that read Teamwork. David was already there, sitting beside the head of HR, a woman named Linda, whom I had barely spoken to in 3 years. David wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at a spot on the conference table, his jaw tight. Linda did all the talking, her voice a flat, rehearsed monotone. Sarah, thank you for coming in. We've called you here today to discuss your future with Innovate Inc. She slid a thin folder across the table towards me. As you know, the company is moving in a new strategic direction, especially with the upcoming launch. After a thorough review of the marketing department structure, we've made the difficult decision to eliminate your position. I stared at her, dumbfounded. Eliminate my position. the marketing manager position, a month before the biggest launch in this company's history. Linda just nodded slowly. The role of marketing manager as it currently exists is being absorbed into a new, more dynamic team structure. Your responsibilities will be redistributed. I turned to David, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. David, what is this? After everything I've built, Project Chimera is my plan. You know it is. For the first time, he looked at me and his eyes were cold, devoid of any emotion. The company appreciates your contributions, Sarah, he said, his voice like ice. But Jessica has shown remarkable initiative and a fresh perspective that we feel is better aligned with our future goals. She will be taking the lead on the launch. The betrayal was so blatant, so shameless, it literally took my breath away. He had handed my entire career's worth of work to an intern he'd been mentoring behind my back. Linda cleared her throat, eager to get through the script. We are prepared to offer you a standard severance package, contingent on you signing a non-disclosure and non-compete agreement. She pushed a stack of papers towards me. Your network access will be terminated at the end of this meeting, and security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings. It was brutal. Clinical. In the space of 10 minutes, my 3 years of dedication, my late nights, my successful campaigns, my entire professional identity at this company. It was all erased. I was being thrown out like garbage. I didn't argue, I didn't plead. I simply stood up, looked David dead in the eye, and said with a calm I didn't know I possessed, "You are going to regret this." He just smirked, a tiny, arrogant twitch of his lips. As the security guard walked me to my desk, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The shock and hurt were still there, but beneath them, a cold, hard resolve was beginning to form. They thought they had won. They had no idea I already knew this was coming, and I had already set my own plans in motion. The first 24 hours after being fired were a blur of shock and humiliation. Being walked out of the building with my life in a cardboard box while my former colleagues stared was an experience I wouldn't wish on anyone. I went home, ignored the flood of concerned text messages, and allowed myself one evening to feel the full weight of the betrayal. I was hurt, but more than that, I was furious. They hadn't just fired me. They had stolen my work, my ideas, and tried to erase my contribution. That night, sitting in the dark of my apartment, my anger cooled into a diamond, hard purpose. I wasn't going to just move on. I was going to get answers, and then I was going to get justice. My first call was to Mike Williams. I knew that if anyone could help me find digital evidence of what had happened, it was him. I met him at a quiet coffee shop far from our old office. He looked genuinely upset about what had happened to me. "It was disgusting, Sarah," he said, shaking his head. "The way they did it, everyone knows that project was yours." I got straight to the point. "Mike, I need your help. I think David and Jessica have been planning this for months. He didn't just steal my ideas. He must have stolen my actual work files to pass them off as his own. Is there any way to prove it?" Mike leaned forward, his voice low. "Your network account is deactivated, so I can't get into your user folder directly, but I can check the server logs. They track every file creation, modification, and transfer across the entire network. It's a mountain of data, but if you know what you're looking for, you can find anything." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee. "This is risky, Sarah. If they find out I'm pulling these logs, I'm fired, no questions asked." I looked him in the eye. "I know. I would never ask if it wasn't important. They're planning to launch a multi-million-dollar product using a stolen strategy. I can't let them get away with it." He saw the determination in my face and nodded slowly. "All right, I'm in. What are we looking for?" For the next week, we worked in secret. Mike would extract massive data logs from the Innovate Inc. servers at night and send them to me through a secure, encrypted channel. My apartment became a war room. I spent hours sifting through endless lines of code and timestamps, cross-referencing file names with my old project calendars. It was tedious, painstaking work, but patterns began to emerge. The first breakthrough came when I found the creation date for the presentation David had used at the town hall. The file, titled Nexus Launch Strategy DM Final, PPTX, was created on Jessica's computer. But the logs showed something else. Just 10 minutes before that file was created, Jessica's computer had accessed my master project Chimera folder and initiated a bulk transfer of all its contents to a local folder on her hard drive. It was the digital equivalent of a bank heist. She had copied everything: my strategy documents, my market research, my presentation decks, my spreadsheets. The second piece of the puzzle was even more damning. I started digging into David's email archives, which Mike had managed to access. I searched for keywords, my name, Jessica's name, Project Chimera, and there it was. A chain of emails between David and Jessica stretching back 3 months. It started with Jessica sending him my work, rebranding it with minor changes. Here's that competitive analysis you asked for, she'd write, attaching a file I had created a week prior. David's replies were encouraging, guiding her on how to repackage my work as her own. Good work, Jess. Let's tweak slide 4 to focus more on the synergy angle. The board loves that word. The final email in the chain was the smoking gun. It was from David to Jessica, sent the week before I was fired. It read, the board has approved the revised strategy. They are fully on board with you leading the launch. I'll handle the transition with Sarah next week. Just be ready to step in. This is your big break. It was all there in black and white. A premeditated, systematic plot to steal my work and oust me from the company. They had worked together, behind my back, to present my intellectual property as their own creation. Also, David could promote his favorite and take credit for a bold new direction. The evidence was undeniable. Now, all I had to do was figure out the perfect way to use it. With the evidence in hand, my initial impulse was to go straight to a lawyer or leak the emails to a tech industry journalist. But I quickly realized that wouldn't be enough. A lawsuit would be a long, draining battle, and a news story might be dismissed as a disgruntled employee's rant. David and Innovate Inc. had a powerful PR machine that could easily spin the narrative. No, I needed something more impactful. I needed to expose them in a way they couldn't deny, in a forum they couldn't control. My revenge couldn't just be about getting them fired. It had to be about dismantling the lie they had built, piece by piece, in front of the very people they were trying to impress, the Nexus 4. Zero launch event was in 2 weeks. It was going to be a massive affair, a live, streamed keynote presentation for investors, industry press, and major clients from around the world. David and Jessica would be on stage, presenting their strategy and unveiling the product. This was their moment of triumph, the culmination of their deception, and that's when I knew. I wasn't going to crash the party from the outside. I was going to burn it down from within. My plan was audacious, and it hinged on one critical vulnerability, the presentation itself. I knew the exact software they used for these events. I had designed the templates for it myself. More importantly, I knew that the final presentation file would be uploaded to a specific, secure folder on the company's internal event server 24 hours before the keynote. And I knew just the person who had unrestricted access to that server, Mike. I met him again, this time laying out my full plan. Mike, this is the biggest ask yet, and it's the most dangerous. I need to get a file onto that event server. He listened intently, his expression unreadable. What kind of file? He asked. I pulled out my laptop and showed him what I had been working on. It was a presentation deck, but it was my masterpiece. I had spent a week meticulously designing it. It started innocuously, mirroring the official Nexus 4. Zero launch presentation for the first few slides. It had the same branding, the same color scheme, the same professional look. But embedded within this presentation was what I called my Trojan horse. Hidden within the file was a timed macro I had coded myself, at a specific point in the presentation, right when David would be reaching the crescendo of his speech about innovation and integrity. The macro would trigger. It wouldn't crash the system, that would be too crude. Instead, it would seamlessly hijack the presentation. My slides would take over the screen. The first slide was simple, a side-by-side comparison of my original Project Chimera. Document's creation date and the creation date of the file Jessica had copied. The subsequent slides would display the most incriminating emails between David and Jessica, highlighted and enlarged for easy reading. The final slide was a screenshot of David's email explicitly stating his plan to handle the transition with Sarah. It was a digital bomb, and I planned to detonate it live in front of the entire tech world. Mike stared at my screen for a long time after I finished explaining. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the risk to his job versus his sense of justice. They'll be broadcasting live, he said, more to himself than to me. There will be no way for them to cut the feed in time without creating a massive scene. It's brilliant and completely insane. I held my breath, so will you help me? He looked up from the screen and met my gaze. A slow grin spread across his face. David Miller once passed me over for a promotion I deserved because he said I lacked initiative. Let's show him some initiative. Get me the file. I'll make sure it's the one they open on stage. We had our plan. The Trojan horse was ready. All we had to do was wait for the day of the launch, the day of the Nexus 4. Zero launch arrived. I wasn't in the audience, of course. I was in my apartment, watching the official live stream on my laptop, my heart hammering against my ribs. Mike had confirmed it the night before with a simple 2-word text. It's in my Trojan horse file, deceptively named Nexus Launch Final V3. PPTX was sitting on the event server, waiting. There were a dozen things that could go wrong. They might use a backup file, the macro might fail, someone might spot the anomaly, but it was too late for doubts. The event began with the usual corporate fanfare. The CEO of Innovate Inc. gave a glowing introduction, talking about the company's bright future, all thanks to the incredible work of their marketing department. Then he introduced the man of the hour. Please give a warm welcome to our Director of Sales and Marketing, Mr. David Miller. David walked onto the stage to a round of applause, looking smug and confident in his expensive suit. He soaked in the adoration, a wide, predatory smile on his face. Jessica was sitting in the front row, looking up at him with pure, unadulterated worship. David began his speech, his voice booming through the auditorium. He talked about vision, passion, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. Behind him, the presentation began, showing sleek graphics and impressive sales projections. The first few slides were exactly as I had designed them, a perfect replica of the official deck. I watched, my finger hovering over the mouse, my breath caught in my throat. The timing had to be perfect. My macro was set to trigger on the 15th slide, the one titled Our Core Strategy, A New Vision. This was the heart of the presentation, the part where he would claim my work as his masterpiece at Innovate Inc. We don't just follow trends, David declared, his arms spread wide. We create them, and the strategy behind Nexus 4. Zero is a testament to that forward-thinking spirit. It's a vision built on integrity and groundbreaking creativity. He clicked the remote to advance to the 15th slide. For a split second, the correct slide appeared on the massive screen behind him, and then it happened. The screen flickered. My macro executed flawlessly. The new vision slide vanished, replaced by my first evidence slide. On the left side of the screen was a screenshot of my Project Chimera, a master file, with the creation date clearly visible, October 12th of the previous year. On the right, a screenshot of Jessica's copied file, with the creation date from 3 months ago. A collective gasp rippled through the auditorium. David faltered, his words catching in his throat. He stared at the screen behind him, his face a mask of confusion. He clicked the remote again, frantically, but my presentation was in control now. The next slide appeared, the email from Jessica to David, attaching my work with the message, "Here's that competitive analysis you asked for." The one after that showed David's reply, "Good work, Jess. Let's tweak slide 4. The audience began to murmur, people pulling out their phones to record the unfolding disaster. On the live stream chat, comments exploded in a chaotic frenzy. David's face had gone from confused to horrified. He was pale, sweating under the hot stage lights. He turned to the tech crew off stage, mouthing, "What is happening?" But no one could help him. The final slide, my masterpiece, filled the screen. It was David's email to Jessica. "The board has approved the revised strategy. I'll handle the transition with Sarah next week. This is your big break." The words hung in the air, a silent, damning indictment. In the front row, Jessica had her hands over her mouth, her face ashen. The room was utterly silent for a moment, and then the chaos erupted. A journalist from a major tech blog stood up and yelled, "Mr. Miller, can you comment on the authenticity of these emails?" David just stood there, speechless, a deer caught in the headlights of a multi-million-dollar catastrophe of his own making. He opened and closed his mouth, but no sound came out. The live stream was abruptly cut, but it was too late. Thousands of people had already seen it. I closed my laptop, took a long, slow breath, and allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. It was over. The fallout from the launch event was immediate and spectacular. Within an hour, Innovate Inc., launch disaster, was trending on social media. Tech journalists who had been fed a story of innovation now had a much juicier tale of corporate espionage and betrayal. The screenshots from my presentation were everywhere. The story was undeniable because the evidence had been presented by the perpetrators themselves on their own stage during their biggest event of the year. By the end of the day, Innovate Inc., had released a brief, panicked statement announcing that they were launching an internal investigation into the events that transpired, and that both David Miller and Jessica Chen had been placed on indefinite leave. Indefinite leave was just corporate speak for fired. They were gone by the end of the week. The company's stock took a nosedive, and their brand reputation was left in tatters. They had tried to build their success on a lie, and the foundation had crumbled in the most public way imaginable. A few days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was the CEO of Innovate Inc., the same man who had introduced David on stage. His voice was tired and strained. He offered a profuse, if not entirely sincere, apology. Then he made me an offer. He wanted me to come back to the company, not just as marketing manager, but as the new director of marketing, David's old job. The board was very impressed with your presentation, he said, the irony thick in his voice. You have the skills and the integrity we clearly need. You can name your price. It was a tempting offer, the ultimate validation. To return to the scene of the crime not as a victim, but as a victor would have been sweet. But as I listened to him speak, I realized I didn't want it. I didn't want to work for a company whose leadership was so easily fooled or so willing to look the other way. I didn't want to fix the mess they had created. I had exposed the rot, but I had no desire to live in the rebuilt house. Thank you for the offer, I said politely, but I'll have to decline. I'm looking for a company that values its employees from the start, not just after a public relations disaster. I hung up feeling lighter than I had in months. The story of what I did spread quickly through the industry. I was no longer just Sarah Johnson, the fired marketing manager. I was the woman who had orchestrated the most epic corporate takedown anyone had ever seen. My inbox was flooded with messages, not just of support, but with job offers. CEO and VP from rival companies wanted to talk to me. They weren't just impressed by my marketing strategy for Nexus 4. Zero, which was now public knowledge, they were impressed by my courage and ingenuity. I took my time, carefully considering my options. In the end, I accepted a position as head of marketing at a smaller, more innovative competitor, a company known for its transparent culture and ethical practices. They didn't just give me a bigger salary. They gave me creative freedom, and most importantly, their trust. Mike also left Innovate Inc. A month later. He'd had enough of the toxic environment. I immediately hired him to lead my new data analytics team. We were a team again, but this time we were building something positive. I never heard from David or Jessica again. Their careers in the tech industry were effectively over. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't just about watching your enemies fall. It's about building your own success on the ashes of the bridges they burned. I had my new beginning, and it was brighter than anything Innovate Inc. could have ever offered me.